Well, Muslims all over Canada have come forward in protest against Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government, calling on the government to, quote, leave our kids alone, keep gender ideology off our kids. Justin Trudeau claimed on Wednesday that Muslim parents who are against their children being brainwashed by LGBTQ ideology in schools are just victims of misinformation and disinformation from the far right and from the American right wing. That's right. So it reminded us of this piece from former White House spokesperson Jen Psaki, of course, who now works at MSNBC. She echoed this sentiment that Muslims are being controlled by the right in this gender critical movement. Listen.
So lately I've been noticing the reemergence of a very old GOP playbook. The right wing is reviving that same playbook, this time with Muslim Americans and trans people. Hear me out here. The GOP is trying to recruit Muslim Americans, a community that makes up less than 2% of the U.S. population, against another tiny marginalized group of Americans, transgender people.
Well, journalist David Krayden, who's just covering this story, has written a piece in the Post Millennial about this, all these protests that are emerging across Canada as these protests grow. And David joins us now. David, good to see you. So it appears that Trudeau thinks Muslims, I guess, can't think for themselves.
No, he really believes, or he is attempting to make himself believe, that Muslims are, as you said, the victims of some broad U.S. conspiracy. And it answered my question, because when Muslims across Canada, especially here in Ottawa, and Calgary's been a hot center as well for Muslim protests, I asked myself, how is Justin Trudeau going to address this? Because if he attacks the Muslims, it's going to be Islamophobia.
Right.
And yet he can't allow Muslims to attack the gay pride season, as Justin Trudeau calls it. So the question was, does homophobia trump Islamophobia? That's the conundrum Justin Trudeau had. Because when Canada has become a nation, a collectivist nation of identity politics, where every different segmentation has special status and special rights. We're no longer equal under the law, which is where this country originated and where it must go back to. But in Justin Trudeau's Canada, everybody has special status, except, of course, evangelical Christians, who are the most vilified people in Trudeau's planet.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's an interesting dichotomy, isn't it? That why can't the left seemingly cross Muslims? Like, that's an off-limits thing. We absolutely cannot. No, you're brainwashed by the far right. Like, as a Muslim, you're being brainwashed. You are, you're sacrosanct. But Christians, they're fine. They're fine to vilify Christians. Why is that?
They're fine to vilify Christians.
It's a big question.
Unfortunately,
of course,
because evangelical Christians have not fought back to the degree that they have traditionally in the United States against this left-wing upheaval. And I think I am damn proud of what these Muslims have done in this country, because they have taken up the slack from other religious groups, including conservative Catholics, who should be out there as well in great numbers, saying, we don't stand for this. We don't think 13-year-olds should be seeing pornography in their schools or being told they have a right to change their identity, their gender identity, without even telling their parents. And really, Trudeau has gone so far with this LGBTQ ridiculous alphabet soup agenda that people, common sense people of all faiths, are saying this rainbow flag doesn't represent anything except hatred against our values. Because there are a lot of people who still question this sexual fetishism that LGBTQ month is selling people. It's no longer just about tolerance or acceptance of gay people. It's about acceptance and promotion of a huge variety of sexual fetishes and a huge distinction that children can suddenly be treated as adults. And what I fear this is going to, if we allow children to say, I have a right to change my identity at 13 and not tell my parents, and my parents have no say in this, then they can be treated as adults. And that is the broad opening to pedophilia being accepted and legalized. That's where this is going.
Well, we already see the infiltration, of course, by MAPS and others. We see how the rainbow flag went from, gay and lesbian. Suddenly now it's infiltrated with the trans rights activism. So now you've got this new crescent this chevron shape that's now encroached on the flag. How many more things can you cram into this flag? It'd be interesting to try to figure out. But why do you think that they ignore the very tenets of Islam? Right? That's the question here. So he's sitting there talking with these parents, and the parents are saying, no, this is Islam. Like, it's very gendered. Islam is very gendered. And like, you can't, it's like, you can't ride in cars or pray with the opposite sex. It's a very gendered religion. And so it's almost as if they're ignoring that part of it.
Well, it's interesting because it gets back to Trudeau's basic creed, which essentially is a socialist Marxist creed. He believes Muslims have a false consciousness, in the old Marxist phrase, the same way that working class people used to support conservative parties and not socialist parties because they just didn't buy into the ideology. He's saying, what's wrong with these Muslims? They should be thinking like me, because Justin Trudeau is a Catholic. And he has he's had an audience with the Pope. And yet Justin Trudeau cannot abort babies fast enough in this country. We have literally abortion on demand up to the last trimester.
And suicide on
Justin
demand.
Trudeau thinks that's okay.
And now suicide on demand in
suicide on demand.
Yeah.
And the school system is becoming completely obsessed, as it is in the United States. It's becoming completely obsessed, not with teaching children things that are going to enrich their lives and help them become adults. It's teaching them a variety of sexual habits, which have no place in the school system. These are things that the parents have got to be regulating. And Trudeau says that's a far right concept as well, that parents should have any right to do that.
I love that they're leaning on this far right idea that they can't think for themselves. And so Trudeau has done this repeatedly with people, that they're being infiltrated by the far right in America, this ideology. This is why you're setting up this freedom convoy, because you're being infiltrated by the far right, by white supremacists who are taking over. That's who's influencing these people. Why are they speaking for them? Why is the Trudeau government speaking for Muslims instead of listening to them? I mean, they're literally in protest, standing there telling them, keep your hands off our children. It could not be plainer, right? It's not an ambiguous statement. Keep your hands off our children.
Yes, and of course, Trudeau appointed an Islamophobia czar. This is what's so ironic about this, because he sees Muslims as victims. Most Muslims don't see themselves as victims at all. They see themselves as regular human beings working in Canadian society alongside their neighbors. They don't see themselves as victims. Trudeau sees Muslims as victims, and he wants to keep them in a victim box because that fits in with his identity politics. If he can victimize people and segment our society and put one group of people, one race of people, one religious group against another, the identity politics works for the Liberal Party, but it's collapsing right now. And this is the crucial matter here, is that Trudeau's identity politics is demonstrating how hollow it is, that you cannot put people in an ideological box and say, you have to vote Liberal because we're the only party that really stands up for your rights. Because the Liberal Party cannot define rights for anybody. Individuals have to define what their rights are and who they want to vote for. And that's called basic democracy. And that's something Justin Trudeau simply doesn't believe in. He believes in forcing his views on other people and telling them how they should vote. And this is, for a while, you didn't hear the usual U.S. style from the Liberal Party, because they were liking the U.S. style of Joe Biden. They think that's great, the way Joe Biden's going. So now it's gone. It's not U.S. style is not the code word anymore. It's American right wing. It's MAGA Trump. It's U.S. Christians. It's the far right. So it's the vocabulary has changed, but it's the same thing. It's the same idea of pointing to this foreign enemy that's somehow telling people in this country how they should think. And this is an insult not just to Muslims, but to everybody, to a lot of the conservative Catholics who don't like Justin Trudeau either, because he says they've got a false consciousness. They shouldn't be thinking and voting as they do.
Wouldn't be surprised how many members of the White House, the Democratic Party in the United States, are helping out their Canadian friends to the north with Zoom calls and conference calls to help them get on the same language messaging. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised at all. David Krayden, thank you so much. We'll link up the article, your most recent piece in Post Millennial, keeping an eye on Justin Trudeau and speaking for the Muslim population. I would love to hear from the Muslims who are watching our show right now. Let me know in the comments below. What do you think of Justin Trudeau in Canada, our Canadian viewers up there? David, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Clayton.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.